I do want to go back to our study of Genesis. I feel I have to uh, introduce uh, why I'm doing this, because I'm taking a story that is usually taught in what I will call, and this is going to sound a little bit disparaging, and I mean it to be a little bit disparaging, in what I call the Hebrew school adult education version of the teaching. And I think the idea of the Hebrew school adult education has actually not done a service uh, to the educating of Jews and anybody else who wants to study with us, because everything is bowdlerized. Everything goes kind of through a censorious process that people are not helped to directly experience the text. It's as if we're protecting people from the text, and they wonder why the tradition is not deep and is not transformative, does not sustain them, because Hebrew school doesn't sustain people. And the sometimes the adult education courses where the adult needs to go home, without confusion, everything inspired, except the way better adult education courses, and I've taken a few, where we're going to present the depth of a text. If you go home and settle, you go home and settle. But we don't want to stand between you and the text. We're going to deliver the text to you, and you find out what to do with this. So for years, I've been struggling with this, and this is my year of getting to do things I've always wanted to do but never did. And this is one of them. Is just teach Genesis as I read it, translate the Hebrew, give me the illusions, and it is so incredibly deep and unsettling. So we are now in Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 1 is that exquisite creation story with um, the first few lines, of course, are very mysterious, very obscure. And then it goes through the creation of the world that many people are aware of. It goes then to the creation of the human being, and then it says strangely, Na'aseh et ha'adam. Let us create the human being, B'tselmenu kedumutenu, in our tselem, in our likeness, in our demut. And then when you look those words up elsewhere in the Bible, the word tselem doesn't have such a great redolence. Tselem does mean image, but it's from the word tsel, which means shadow, which means something dark. And the other time B'Tselem is used in Psalms, it has a really sad, kind of tragic, disturbing context. So the question is, did the author of Genesis know of the usage in the book of Psalms? I happen to think yes. So therefore, we have this disturbing but standard idea in great literature that one story can mean two things at the same time, and words can mean two things at the same time. It's in the Tselem of Elohim, which sounds good, but the word Tselem also has a tragic dimension written into it. And then that word Elohim, people say, why does it say let us? And people talk about the majestic plural, or Christians say it's the Trinity already at work, when actually the idea of a divine council, that Elohim is plural. You see this in Job chapter 38. You see this in Psalms 82. There is something called the divine council. You can look that up. So it seems that the divine has, you can either call them B'nai Elohim, uh, second level gods, angels, some kind of divine forces uh, with whom God seems to consult very infrequently in the Bible, but frequently enough that it's a real thing. So that mystery is taken away. Now, I remember if I were in Hebrew school and they said, "Let us make," we said, "Why plural?" And they said, uh, uh, "The majestic we." We will now repair to the drawing room. I said, okay, I heard that in a movie once. That sounds satisfactory. Did they know there was a divine council? Were they afraid to say it? Did they think we were all going to collapse and run home? I think we would have been intrigued if they said, "Oh, wow, there's a divine council in the Bible." And then I would have looked up uh, Second Kings and Job 38 and Psalm 82. I think I would have been intrigued and really interested, as opposed to it's the majestic we. Uh, as I said last time, also I think the secret of the story is revealed. We realize it's really not about the creation of the world. The capstone of Genesis 1 to 2, 3 is, of course, Shabbat. And that is a mystery in and of itself, where Shabbat came from, where the 7-day week came from. I went into it last time. I won't do it again. But it is a great mystery. And, I thought it was about the creation of the physical world, when actually the deeper theme is the creation of time. So we've already done that. Then last week we worked into from Genesis 2 to 3, Genesis 2, we have a completely alternative creation story. And instead of Vayivra Elohim et Adam, and Elohim creates the human being somehow in this purely creative act of bara. We have this with the creation of light, an act of divine will, and now we have it back in Genesis 1:26. Now here we have it's now called Adonai Elohim. Now that's interesting because in the first story, Elohim, the word Elohim, God or divine counsel, was used 35 times straight. Now we have Adonai Elohim. Now, what does Adonai mean? I want to remind you that when we say Adonai, we are not translating a biblical word. The Hebrew word is Yud, He, Vav, He, YHVH. That is not pronounced Adonai. So for those of you who missed this talk, I give about once a year, Yud, He, Vav, He, YHVH is from the Hebrew verb root He, Vav, He, or He, Yud, He, Haya or Hawa or Hava, which it has a sense of to be. And Yahweh, or as scholars like to say, or I'll say Yahweh. By the way, you don't say this in an Orthodox synagogue. They might ask you to, they might escort you out the door. You're not supposed to say, God's name, which is what I'm telling you. And so they say, well, what's the Yud? For the grammarians out there, you put the Yud in front of the root, the He, Vav, He, and it can either talk about the future or the causative. So for example, dalak means to be lit. Yadlik means to light something. We say madlik, ner. So haner dolek, ani madlik et haner. I cause the light to be lit or light the candle. So Yahweh is taking the root, He, Vav, He, to be, into the causative. So a reasonable translation of Yud, He, Vav, He is the cause of being. And we just don't know what that means. The tradition has been, and this is going to sound a little bit Heideggerian if you've ever read Sein und Zeit, Time and Being. The first 50 pages is just a very deep, wondering investigation of what this word sign, to be, sign, being means. And it's a poem. This when people say, hard for them to read Heidegger's Time and Being. If you read it as a poem and read one page a day for a year, which is what I tried to do, it's much more comprehensible. But the question of being is an ancient question. I mean, you see it in Aristotle, in the collected Aristotle's work. It's introduced with a unit called the organon, which I found impenetrable. I don't know any Greek. I know enough German to translate, but I don't know any Greek. And people say no one really knows what the organon means, except that it's a deep investigation into the nature of being. What does it mean to be? How do you experience your own being? Now, I'm going to venture to say that ancient Israelites had the same sophistication as Aristotle, and there were a group of people who deeply experienced their own being. And when you deeply, pardon me, experience your own being and you believe in the divine, you experience the divine within you. So when you hear Adonai, think Yahweh or Yahweh, which is the causative of Haya, which means to be, therefore cause of being, therefore encourages you to contemplate your own being, which is a deep mystery. And when you contemplate your own being and you have any sense of the divine, you feel that the divine being and your being are interconnected and maybe somewhat the same thing. It's a very deep idea. And therefore, the tragedy when they translated Yahweh as Lord. And I've never found that meaningful. We call God Lord, in German, Herr, Lord. It's not what it means. Adonai, they use so that you don't say Yahweh because of the third commandment. But try to imagine if in all the translations it said cause of being. And then you go in and experience your own being. So it was cause of being in the most metaphysical, mystical sense, but also in a highly intimate sense. meaning when you experience your being, you go very deep inside. I actually think if you don't have a connection with the divine, a meditation on your own being might bring you into a connection with the divine, because I believe that the divine is there. The divine being and our being meet each other deep within our souls. And if you don't meditate on your own being, you won't meet the divine being. I'm not talking the divine being as a concept. I'm talking about as an experience. So when we say Adonai, I'm thinking all the way from a metaphysical concept to the intimacy of the divine within. I'm seeing it has a whole range of meanings. Now, therefore, what does Adonai Elohim mean? Right? I haven't read this anywhere, so I'm probably completely wrong, but I like to tell you what I think. There's a feature in Hebrew grammar called smichut, where you take two nouns, and when you put them together, they have the sense of. So, for example, when you first learn Hebrew on a kibbutz, a chadar ochel. Cheder is a room, ochel is food. So you can say, Eifo ha-cheder shel ochel, where is the room of the food, or chadar ochel, dining room. So words that would have an of, the of is taken out, and the words are put together. For example, Knesset means assembly. Bayit means a house or a home. You can say, Eifo ha-bayit shel ha-Knesset, where is the house of the assembly? Or say, Beit Knesset. So it's all over the Hebrew language. So my question is, what if Adonai Elohim means Adonai of the divine council, the chief of the divine council? I haven't read this anywhere. I probably went to Hebrew University and said it. They laughed me out of the room, but it occurred to me, so I thought I would share with you. Suddenly, they don't want to keep it talking about Elohim, but rather who's actually in charge of the Elohim, which is Yud He Vav He, the cause of being. The cause of being as the senior, the chairman of the board of the Elohim. That's enough on that. So as we go through chapter 2, we have the beginning of what I'm going to call a Khan. Now, what are the elements of a Khan? The elements of a Khan are, for example, remember the point of the Khan is to deprive something of the dupe or the mark. There's always a mark. There's the intended victim of the Khan. So there's the setup of the Khan, and then there's the actual assistant who might perform the Khan. The Khan artist is in the background, and the assistant is in the front there. And there's an entire setup created. And then also now the second con man is to allure the dupe or the mark, create a sense of temptation, desire, fear of loss, oftentimes through setting up confidence. Remember, so the con actually is a confidence game. I'll have you have confidence in me, and then I'm going to do the trick, which is reverse the fortunes and then get what it is that the group wanted. And then there's the blow off. Then there's the disappearing, the end of the game. Now, it's a harsh way to see the text, but I've looked up a few definitions of con games, and you're free to differ with me, but if you look at the structure of a con, we have it here. It's not the only thing going on, but it's one of the things going on. So in Genesis chapter 2, what do we have? We have, you can take a look at it here. Genesis chapter 2:16. Adonai Elohim commands the human being, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you must not eat it, for the day you eat it, you will die. Very emphatic. The day you eat of it, you will die. Now that just sounds like the laws of the garden. Don't put your hand in the electric box. Right? Everything else you can touch, don't put your hand there. So we think Adam's saying, all right, that's sounds okay. Thanks for warning me. It's a highly poisonous tree. If I eat anything of it, I will promptly die. Thanks for the good word. Now, what else has Adam done during this time? He has named all the animals. Now that sounds pretty benign until we are introduced to one of the animals whom Adam seems to have named when he named the animals. So there's this one animal that we meet in the beginning of chapter 3, the Nachash. So because of the story, we have to assume that Adam named the Nachash, and the name Nachash has a very, very deep, disturbing meaning. So now we end the setup. They're in the garden. There's this, electrified or poisonous tree right in the middle of the garden. God says, don't touch it. He says, okay. And they are arumim, meaning naked. I mentioned last time the great wordplay. By the way, I've read commentaries on Genesis where many commentators are not aware that the word arum, meaning the human beings, naked, and arum, referring to the snake as shrewd, they think it's the same word with two meanings. They're completely two different meanings. Arum is naked from the word erva, which means genitalia, ayin resh vav or yud, and the word arum for the snake is from aram. We hear it in the word orma, which means devious, duplicitous, and conniving. Now, the word arum can be used in both. So it's just a homophone. Is two words from two different roots that sound completely different. Erva does not sound like orma at all, but there's one form in which they sound just alike. The we'll call the nakedness innocence of the man and his wife, and the shrewdness, the duplicitousness of the snake, which means you need both of them. When you think of the con, you need the innocent dupe or mark, and you need the shrewd con man, right? Same word, because they're part of the same game. So when you end chapter 2, sounds great. Well, they're in the garden. There's one tree not to eat of. He named all the animals. They're walking around innocent. Everything's good. Then the trouble comes when you get to chapter 3, where the con is executed. So it says in chapter 3:1, it says V'hanachash haya arum. Here's the word: cunning, duplicitous, of all hayat hasadeh, the animals of the field, which Adonai Elohim had made. Now, what about this word nachash? I want to give you one reference that you can write down. If you would like to write down, you can go to 2 Chronicles 33. Reach way back at the end of the Bible. 33:6, if I'm not mistaken. It's King Manasseh, or maybe 33:6. 33:6, King Manasseh. He was the son of King Hezekiah, who was a good king, and King Manasseh was a very, very bad king. And here's how they condemn him. I'm going to the English. 33:6, 2 Chronicles 33:6. Manasseh passed his sons through the fire in the valley of Hinnom. Gay Hinnom, Hinnom's Gulch, which came in Hebrew, Gehenna, or hell. Why hell? Because people burnt their children there. Now, pass through the fire, we don't know if they walked through a fire and came out on the other side, or they actually were sacrificed to the god Moloch. They actually sacrificed to a fire god. In any case, it's horrific. And then it says, as the Bible is condemning King Manasseh, he practiced astrology, read omens, did sorcery, performed necromancy, and conjured up spirits. He did everything that God told him not to do. What's the Hebrew here? It says he hevir et banav ba'esh begay ben Hinnom. He passed his children through fire in the gulch of the son of Hinnom, which became Gehinnom, and then Gehenna. Onen, which from the word cloud, so someone who reads the sky. Nichesh, practiced divination. Chishef, witchcraft. Ov, necromancer. Yidoni, conjured up familiar spirits. Okay, that we find in Chronicles chapter 33, verses 5 and 6. It goes on and on. He's a very bad guy. Now we're looking I'm recreating this as Adam is going around and naming the animals. This is my recreation. He looks at the snake and says, this guy's trouble. I have a bad feeling about this one. But he says the word that's coming up is sorcery, witchcraft, practice divination, all leading to child sacrifice. But a name's a name. That's your name. Just going to watch out for you. So Adam, going from the previous chapter, Adam names the Nachash Nachash. How else would he have gotten his name? Adam gave all the names. Second thing is, that the divine created all these creatures. So when the divine created rhinoceros and caterpillars and armadillos, God created a nachash. And so there's a nachash. Now, the divine knows there's a nachash. Adam knows there's a nachash. Who doesn't know that there is a nachash? Right? The woman. But she's not given the name Eve till the end of chapter 3, by the way. We'll just call her Ha'isha, the woman. She has no idea of this. So not only is she arum, traipsing around the garden with no clothes on, she's really naive. She knows nothing what's going on. And so she is the initial dupe. She's the mark. So we just have to have a sense, if you set all this up, which means if the camera were on Adam when he named the snake, right? Just try to imagine that moment. You're trouble. Your name is Nahash, and you're connected with sorcery and divination and witchcraft and child sacrifice, but that's your name. Just stay away from me. And then Nahash goes, yeah, okay, I'm not gonna, just you stay away from me, I'll stay away from you. We're good. And then next scene opens. The Nachash is either standing near or draped around the tree of knowledge with a smile on his face, and Eve comes walking by. And we who are watching say, oh no, something horrible is going to happen. Well, that's how movies work. So now we have the enticement. This is all cons say, oh, look at this. Verse 3:1. Did God say you can eat from that you shall not eat from any tree of the garden? So when you say, she already knows she can eat from any tree, and then he mentions the opposite. And when you say not eat, that presents a fear of loss. What? We can't eat from the tree of the garden? So she comes back and says emphatically, the snake says, Af ki amar Elohim lo tochlu mikol eitz hagan, right? That you can't eat from any tree of the garden? And she says, no, vatomer Aisha el nachash, mepri eitz hagan nochal. We can eat from any tree of the garden. Umipre eats asher batoch hagan, but the fruit of the tree in the midst of the garden, amar Elohim, Elohim said, lo tuchlu mimenu, don't eat of it. V'lo tigubo, don't even touch it. Pen tumutum, lest you die. I mentioned last time, now we have a great sense of unease because Adam clearly added in touch instead of die. And we see very often the human condition, there's a prohibition. You add stuff to it because you want to put we're a fence around the Torah. Don't eat it. Don't even touch it. Just stay away from it. Now, this is highly intentional. So in the Midrash, which I'm not citing as we study, because Midrash is different from studying Bible, for me is highly intentional. In the Midrash, it says that the snake nudged her into the tree. And I don't think that's far from the story. He nudges her into the tree, according to the Midrash, and she doesn't die. Now try to imagine the woman. She says, he lied to me. He lied to me. If he was lying about that, was he lying about everything? Right? I asked him, am I the only one you love? Yeah, you're the only one, honey. Right? Was he lying about that? Is there some other woman, hidden away in some other part of the garden? So that's the natural human condition. I've been lied to. She loses confidence in Adam. Now, again, I'm doing literary interpretation. In whom does she place her confidence? The Nachash. Because the Nachash was telling the truth. She didn't die when she touched it. Remember, this is information that Adam gave. And so Adam said, when you touch it, you'll die. She doesn't believe in him anymore. So the Nachash has gained her confidence, which is the next step of the con game. Now the serpent. Now this is the enticement. This is the thing where you get the dupe or the mark to actually engage in the trick of the con. Verse 4. It says, Vayomer hanachash el ha'isha. The Nachash says to the woman, Lo mot tamutum, you're not going to die. Ki yodea Elohim, because Elohim knows. Bayom acholchem mimenu, on the day you eat from it, benifkechu enechem, your eyes will be open. Veitam ka Elohim, you will be like Elohim. Yod'e tov bara, knowing good and evil. So Eitz dat tov bara, it has the knowledge is in there, the knowing is in there. Well, how do you get the knowing of the tree? Eat from the fruit. He says, you're not going to die. You're actually going to understand exactly what it means to know good and evil, not good from evil, good and evil. So now the Nachash has said something true, that they will not die. Now this, of course, creates another crisis of confidence, because when Adam discovers this in a few sentences, Adam loses confidence in Elohim, who said you're going to die, when clearly he's not, she didn't die, and the snake actually spoke the truth. So we go on in the story. By the way, the Hebrew word for open eyes, there's two Hebrew words for open. Niftach is just open like a door. Nifkehu, pikeach has a sense of eyes open in some intellectual sense. So it's not just your eyes are opened, but nifkehu, it's a more sense of an intellectual apprehension of something. He says, so like your mind's going to get open. Vatera Haisha now comes where the woman is appreciating the trees just as Elohim had created them. We see back in chapter 2, verse 9, all the wonderful trees, and they are what? Nechmad lemar'eh, desirable to see, tov lema'achal, and good for eating. That's what we see back in Genesis 2:9. Right? Now we go here. The woman sees something in addition. Just what 2:9 says, but look in 3:6. Nechmad ha'etz, hold on a second. Vatera ha'isha, and the woman saw, ki tov ha'etz lema'achal, is good for eating. V'chi, now she adds this, ki ta'ava hu le'enayim. Now a ta'ava comes into Yiddish as a taiva. A ta'ava is a deep appetite. So it's a tava, it's an appetite for the eyes. Appetite for the eyes. So now we have another part of the kan, which is desire or lust. So the words over in Genesis 2:6 are now greatly expanded. Tov lema'achal, which is okay, good for eating. Ta'ava le'enayim, profound desire. By the way, ta'ava is often connected with sexual desire, but also with gustatory desire. Have you ever heard Israelis say b'te'avon? B'te'avon? It's from here. Okay, so it means eat with desire. Okay, so you should like your food. So sometimes, because I know these odd things people say, b'te'avon. I say, what, in lust? I'm not sure what you're saying to me. They said, knock it off with your Hebrew etymology. It's just, eat the food. So, but ta'ava is a deep kind of lust or desire. Okay. Ta'ava le'enayim, and then nechmad. Before, nechmad was used in a very benign sense, and now here it is. Nechmad ha'etz lahaskil. Nechmad ha'etz lahaskil. So they're language-speaking beings, though innocent. They have language. Now, what is lahaskil? It says nechmad lahaskil. Haskalah is the Hebrew word for the enlightenment. Look in the book of Daniel. Lahaskil has a sense of mystical knowledge. Is good to eat, kind of erotically desirable, and will give me mystical knowledge. No downside to this, right? Try to imagine one food, looks good, tastes good, and will give you mystical knowledge. Who's going to turn that down? Okay, 29 cents a pound, give me a whole bag. So right away it says, without a pause, it says, "Vatikach mepiriyo," she took from the fruit, "vatochal," and she ate it. And within one breath, it says, "Vatiten gam leisha," she gave it to her man, "ima vayochel," and he ate. In one verse, the fortunes of the world have completely shifted. One tiny little compressed verse. She says all that, and she goes, she took it, she ate it, gave it to her husband, he ate it, boom. Now, a lesser author would have drawn that out. And she looked at it, and she considered it, And she held it up and gave a soliloquy. Now here's like, crunch, crunch. And you say, what just happened? So we have that. Now we're at the end of verse 6. And then it says, "Vatipachna einei shnehem," and their two eyes were again nifkichu, sense of their minds were open. Vayid'u, and they knew what? Eru mimhem, they knew they were naked. Right? First thing, they knew they were naked. Now, this is universally and accurately presented as they suddenly became aware of themselves. So this is a moment of self-awareness, but self-awareness through shame. I have to dilate here a bit. Helene, I know your ears are going to perk up. I mean, you'll comment next time or something. But I want you to imagine the profundity of self-awareness through shame. I assume you've all had moments when you were embarrassed and ashamed. You were exposed, your face turned red, you were caught out. Either you did something, somebody found out something about you. Those dreams where we're naked in the dream, and the sense of that you realize that you are exposed. Now, the biblical author, if you were reading this for the first time, you wouldn't expect this. When she ate the apple, what would you expect? That the heavens would open up, that they'd see the angels, they see the blueprint of reality. What they saw is something deep about their own nature. And from the work of Gershon Kaufman that I've been teaching in Wisdom Works, one of the deepest, most troubling experiences we can have as a human being is the sense of shame. Now, I think it takes a deep psychological mind, like Gershon Kaufman in his book, Shame, the Power of Caring, where more than any other author has delved into the psychology of shame. And we all have shame wounds, some more severely than others, and how you work out of the shame wounds. One of the most influential books in my entire life. Certainly connected me to my shame wounds. I began to see so much trouble that people have with other people are they touch each other's shame wounds. They provoke other people's shame wounds, and people flip out. People go crazy when their shame wound is touched or exposed. Many people live their entire lives covering up their shame wound. They have shame about something, so they compensate in some other area. Now, their compensation looks fine, but in their maybe fully unconscious to them, one reason they're so deeply pursuing that endeavor was because of their shame wound. Now, I'll give you one of the most interesting lectures in the Hebrew Union College when I was a second-year rabbinical student back from Israel studying. We had a practical rabbinics class. The teacher was so great. He said, "You all want the word rabbi in front of your name." Yeah, he says, "What are you hiding?" We went, "What?" He says, "Anybody who wants the word rabbi in front of their name, you're hiding something. You're compensating for something." He says, "You don't have to tell the class, but make sure you're honest with yourself." I was looking and said, "Okay, can he see me?" Like, did he just look right through me? He just knew it as a fact. When you put a word in front of your name, whether it's doctor, professor, anything, when you take a position of authority over other people, right? Suddenly you're on a higher level and they can't question you because you have this role, you have this authority. And many times when we take roles of authority, we just got there because we're good at what we do. Other people recognize it. But according to our professor, and he just did a scatter shot through the room. Maybe it applies to you, maybe you don't. But when we went into the lunchroom, we went, "Oh crap, what was that? What was that?" Because of course, each of us in wanting to be rabbis, we're compensating for something because everybody's compensating for something. So when they suddenly realize their eyes are open, and this is the brilliance of the author, because obviously the embarrassment of being naked is a mystery because all the other animals walk around naked. And if we're like all the other, nefesh chayot, because they're all a nefesh chaya, we're a nefesh chaya, the birds and the bees and the walking around dogs and horses, they're all nefesh chaya. We're also a nefesh chaya, but we have the breath of God in us. And intrinsic to the breath of God being us is shame. Go figure that. Look how deep that is. So this book affected me so deeply that back when I started teaching Jewish spirituality, in the 90s, I was teaching the Ahava Rabbah prayer in the morning service. It says, and if you study Torah, lo nevosh v'olam va'ed, and we shall never feel shame. And I'm thinking to myself, what does studying Torah have to do with not experiencing shame? Now that led to me one of the most productive courses of study that I'm still on. But the question is, you can work through shame by blocking, by denying, by compensating, or you can go deep into it. And I think going into the depths of shame is one of the deepest, most productive things we can do as a human being. So from my perspective, if you're teaching Torah, if you're teaching spirituality and you're not teaching shame, you're not teaching Torah and you're not teaching spirituality, because that has to be addressed. I'll go further and say, all the years I taught in the rehab world, one by one by one, I taught in an all-male center, the young men were suffering from their very deep shame wounds. And one of the reasons they were medicating with drugs and alcohol was the unbearable nature of the shame wound. And how to get relieved of the shame wound? Well, you can compensate in all kinds of ways. You can deny, hide, run. You can live a life of pretense. You can live the big lie, which is what most people do. Or you can medicate, which is what a lot of people do. Or you can take the road less traveled and say, well, I'm going to confront this and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to go into that shadow and I'm going to loosen those cords and loosen those chains. And whatever it means to be a human being, my eyes have now been open to my shame wound, and I'm going to confront that beast. So for me, ever since the 90s, when I read Gershon Kaufman, that's been a deep part of my path. And when I do second level wisdom work, after virtue, rationality, and all those kinds of things, the second level is a close study of Gershon Kaufman, which I'm looking forward to getting back to once I take my rest and recuperation. I never rested from my surgery, so I finally had a chance to take the doctor said, take 6 to 8 weeks off. I said, yeah, right. Well, I guess what? Now I can do it, except for Friday nights. Anyway, so the depth of, they realized their eyes were open and they experienced their shame. This is so deep. I have to stop talking now, but it's deeper than you can possibly imagine. And for me, the brilliance of the author, their eyes were open and shame, embarrassment, nakedness. That author had been naked in a dream once. There's no doubt in my mind. They knew they were naked. Now, yed'u from the word da'at. So what was the da'at they had? The da'at of their nakedness means the experience of shame. Immediately, vayitpiru alei te'ena, and they sewed fig leaves by asulahim hagorot, and they made themselves like a loincloth, it's like an apron. Now, so that takes us to the question I might have to end here today. What was the tree? Well, it never says apple tree. So if someone says, they ate from the apple, say, let's go to the, what does it say apple? It never says apple. Not an apple tree. Now, why apple? I read, I don't know for sure, that the word apple in Latin is malum, which of course means bad, mal. So the Latin author may have said, it had to be a malum, it had to be an apple because apples are bad and that's it. But everybody calls it, they eat from the apple. They didn't eat from any apple. It says they ate from the fruit. But they made a loincloths of te'ina, which is a fig. Okay, a fig tree. Okay, if there's any children in the room, ask them to go get you something. All right, very good. Look at a fig closely, right? Unembarrassedly. It looks a little bit like a testicle. Okay, now you may never eat figs again in the rest of your life. Okay, I hope that didn't do that for you. But when I realized, okay, I'll eat the fig. But they saw things and everything, and they look, and now when it's a fig tree, right? Sorry, folks, the tree is a phallic symbol, and the fruit are symbols of testicles. Okay, so it's the testicles of the fruit that actually deliver over the power. So they ate the testicle of the phallic symbol. Wow, that's deep and disturbing. I didn't see that coming. And so they grab the closest leaf of it and say, get a leaf, fig leaf. Okay, so they take a leaf of the phallic symbol and its array of testicle images, and they make themselves a little garment. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is what's happening because they take a fig leaf. I believe that figs can be images of testicles, and of course, the tree is a phallic symbol. So now that they call it Gan Eden, which means the garden of sexual delight, that's the name makes sense. Except Eden now is the darker side of sexuality. Remember when Sarah realizes she is going to have a child, she says, "Would a woman my age know Edna?" So clearly, the word Eden has a sense of sexuality. But here, it's you might say, the experience of sexuality that is delivered over in shame. Now, that's disturbing, but it's true. Okay? So the power of our reproductive power is also connected to the experience of shame. Okay? Meaning it's something that on one hand should be covered up. On the other hand, it regenerates humanity. So the author of this I think, knew all of this, the the power of reproduction, but it has to be hidden. If it's not covered up, you experience shame. And and perhaps this person said, "What is this thing called shame? What is this thing called embarrassment? What is this?" And people, because I think they were like us, they had their philosophers. He dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and then comes write a story, write a poem, right? So I'll stop here for today. The main thing I want to deliver over to you in honor of this story is now that we've reached one of the high points of the story, which means what was the con about? What did the snake want? The snake wanted them to feel shame. That was the payoff for the snake. That was the payoff for the snake. Okay? Meaning the payoff is the misery of another human being. Think about your lives. Are there people for whom the payoff is another person's misery? Anybody know anybody like that? Yeah, for sure. There are people for whom the payoff is another person's misery. Now, but set up in the background. Okay, who told Adam, if you eat from it, you will die? Adonai Elohim. Did he die? No. Did his wife die when she ate of it? No. So who misled them in the beginning? Who gave them the big distraction? Adonai Elohim in chapter 2. Who told the truth? The snake. He says, "You're not going to die. Your eyes are going to get open." It's exactly what happened. So now when you read this line, the reader, if you read this for the first time, you would be shocked. You would shudder, right? You would be undone. What just happened? What is this about? And that's a very deep thing. I've tried to translate from the Hebrew as well as I can. What is this about? Who wrote this? What are they trying to communicate? To what kind of people? And what did this author know in order to write such a thing? So these are the questions I want to deliver over to you. Now, we've gone out of adult education, where, they became, they became of their, overcame their innocence and violated a law. That's such a superficial reading of the text. It's so much more so much psychoanalytically and philosophically much more. I hope take this as an invitation to study shame, study the symbolism of the snake, study symbolism of phallic symbols and other symbols of genitalia, and the connection between shame and human reproduction. It's a fascinating area. It's all crunched right into this story. So next time we'll go into the consequences, which is introduced by a very, very disturbing term. Vayishma'u et kol Adonai Elohim mithalech bagan leruach hayom. So there they are, putting on their fig leaves, trying to catch a breath, and then they hear. Once to get it exactly right. Vayishma'u. They heard the sound or the voice of Adonai Elohim mithalech bagan leruach hayom, walking around the garden in the breeze of the day. They hear the voice or sound of Adonai Elohim, mithalech bigan, walking around the garden, leruach hayom, right, in the wind of the day. Vayitchaber ha'adam v'ishto. So they hid mipnei Adonai Elohim betoch hagan ha'ez, because Adonai Elohim was walking around the garden. Okay. Now, this violates so many of our norms of how we think about God. Walking around. Obviously, this author is again setting up a collision, setting up a confrontation. Doesn't care about theology, doesn't care about the incorporality of God, doesn't care about any of that. He's telling a story, and no theological strictures are going to get in his way of telling a good story, a brilliant story. All right, so that's up for today. I hope you can share with me the depth and excitement of studying this story as it is written. And we'll pick up next time with what was God doing walking around the garden, in the breeze of the day.